Hi, I'm Bob Dixon, and I'm a veteran, and I appreciate what you guys do for a living. And I am really honored to be here, part of your Improvement and Innovation Forum. I love being around people who aren't happy with the status quo. And it's not that you're not happy with what the VA does or what Vision is doing, it's that you always are looking for something to do to improve things. It's a matter of thinking about, oh, there's got to be a better way to do this. And I love being in a room full of people who are always thinking, is there a better way, and how am I part of making things better? So I'm honored to be here. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity. One of the things that improvement and innovation brings about is a change in how we think. And in order to think a little bit differently about our jobs and about what we do, I like to start off with a little bit of an exercise. And if you'll humor me for just a second, if you can think back on this week, think back on the last several days and what you participated in, and kind of let that flow over you for a second. And then think back on your morning today. How did your morning go? Think back on that. Now, if you could, and you can put it in the comments if you would like to, that'd be great. If you could just think about one thing that has brought you joy today, something that made you happy, something that you're grateful for. Just put down one thing, and you can put it right down there in the comments, and that'd be great. Thank you for that. If you could also then think back on the last 4 days and think about today and this morning, and think about one thing that you learned, something new, something that you didn't know before, but now you do. And you could type that in or write a note to yourself. But I encourage you not to just say, okay, there's some guy on the screen, he doesn't know if I'm doing it or not. I encourage you to write it down, whether or not you put it in the chat or you put it in your own notebook and your notes for this week. Okay. And the third thing I would like you to write down is, what's one good idea that you've had this week? One good idea. Now, in bureaucracies, good idea often comes as a negative term. Like, hey, okay, here comes the new guy with a bunch of good ideas. But those good ideas are sometimes the seeds for the great ideas that help us change our organizations in a positive way. Okay, so that was three things: something that you that brought you joy, something that you've learned, and a good idea. Now, why do I ask you to do that? Far too often we go through processes, we go through our days kind of on autopilot. The alarm goes off at the same time every day. We have a routine in the morning. We get to our desks and we follow a routine for this. And a lot of times we're not paying real attention to what we're doing. Too often we're not paying attention to, attending to things that make us joyful, things that we're learning, and good ideas that we're having. In innovation, a good idea, in my opinion, a good idea is a gift. It's like the universe reached out and said, "Okay, I want to fix something, and I'm going to give it to Bob over there. I'm going to plant the seed with that guy and see what he does with it." It's a gift from the universe. I can't let that go. I can't just let that come in and go, "Oh yeah, acknowledge it," and then let it go. I have to attend to it. So in this exercise of thinking about things that you're grateful for, that starts to set your mindset that there are good things. No matter how bad your day is, there are good things in it. And always an opportunity to learn. You hear that? You learn something every day. Well, only if you pay attention. And that's what I'm asking. Pay attention to those things that you've learned this week. And then what's a good idea? The next step of that is thinking about that good idea. What is that good idea that you've come up with? And what are you going to do about it? It's one thing to sit here for a week and talk about improvement and innovation, and something quite different to put it into action. And the beautiful thing is that I saw during this week was there are people of action right here. I got to listen in on some of the improvement plans. It was really, really cool to listen to how much work and how much thought went into it. one of the most difficult things in an organization such as this, let's face it, we're a government bureaucracy. Government bureaucracies are not good at change. In fact, the entire concept of bureaucracy is designed to produce predictable results. If you're producing predictable results, it's because you're doing the same thing the same way every time. And if you're doing the right things the right way, that's fantastic. But we all know sometimes our bureaucracy, our processes, our procedures aren't serving us or our customers, our clients, our veterans, the way we want them to. That's where you come in. That's where you challenge this. There's got to be a better way. This can be better. And so to be in a forum where there's hundreds of people out there who keep thinking, I can do this better, we can do this better, there must be a better way, is fantastic. So this has been a great event. We got to play with Legos. We talked about video games. We talked about how those are metaphors for how we are going to improve our different processes and what are the innovations for tomorrow. How are we adapting to changing situations? Okay, great stuff. So what? What's the so what for the week? And it's going to be different for a lot of you, right? The so what for me or the so what for you, so what for chat are going to be different. But if you let them go, if you don't think about the so what, if you don't think about how am I going to bring this back and let it explode in my part of the organization where I live, where I work, where I influence. So what? What did you do this week? Did you just sit in front of a camera and a screen for a week and take a couple of notes? Or are you fired up like I am about what's going on here? That's the big question. So what? What are you going to do with the lessons that you learned, the things that made you happy, and the good ideas that you came up with this week? What are you going to do about it? That's great. I mean, it's amazing, right? Think all the things that we're going to be doing with this. And I hope for this week is that you found some inspiration. I hope that, and I saw the applause. Yeah, I go Team Miami and go Orlando. It was so much inspiration happening of people applauding improvements and innovations and new ways of doing things to make things better. And I hope that you bring that inspiration back with you to your everyday job. It doesn't do us any good to get together for a week and talk about improvement and innovation if we just let it set here. I hope also for this week that you have garnered a sense that great things are possible. When COVID hit, we had so many troubles. We didn't know what we were going to do. And here we are, it's almost 2 years that we're into this. And I'm listening to, hey, here's how we created this project. Here's how we created this system. Here's how we adjusted to that. We had people coming with families and we found a place for them and a method for them to get telecare right there in the clinics. Amazing stuff. Now we've learned more. We've figured out a lot of things. What are we going to do with it? And I hope you know that great things are possible. You have this sense of it. And moreover, that you believe that you can be a part of that possibility. One of the most frustrating things I had as a commander when I was in the Corps of Engineers were people who would complain about things not being as good as they could be. And then when you ask them what they would do about it, they're like, well, who am I? I'm just a GS 12 or 11 or 9, and I can't think of, that's for the grown-ups to think of. Come on. You've got great ideas no matter what level you are. And you know that great things are possible. You have to believe that you can be part of that. You can have an influence on that no matter what level you are. Now, that's only true if those people in leadership positions have figured that out, right? So I'm looking at you leaders out there. If you are a leader and you have smart people working for you, and they come to you with, hey, I've got a good idea about how we can do things, that's not the time to say, hold on. You go sit in your cubicle and do what you do, right? We've got this. We've got a whole process for it. You'd be amazed at what people will come up with and the things that they will string together in terms of innovation and improvement, that if you as a leader encourage that. The first time you shoot down a new idea, whether or not it's one you're going to implement, it doesn't really matter, right? When they come to you, leader, when they come to you and say, I've got a better way to do this, listen. And if you shoot them down, no, shut up and get back to your cue. That's the last time they're going to bring a good idea to you. And this may be the man or woman that's going to come up with the next big thing for you and for your organization. And you're going to stifle it right there. You're going to put it out. And eventually they're going to feel unappreciated. They're going to go find something else to do for a living, someplace where they are going to appreciate their ideas. Now, I get that there's sometimes folks that come up with a good idea every single day, and not all of them are useful. And that's something that we have to work through. But how you work through that, leader, how you work through that matters. So think about that. It does take leadership, and it does take people from every part of the line and block chart in order to improve and innovate. Great. So we are in a unique time. I'm so thrilled that you guys are doing this at a time when it looks like we're kind of coming out of the pandemic. We're starting to be able to deal with it, particularly here in Florida, where we've sort of figured a couple of things out. But this is kind of a weird time for innovation, right? Because it's out of necessity. And there have been times and situations that really stokes the fires of innovation, and it really accelerates change. One of those things is warfare. Right? I'm an old soldier, and you service old soldiers, so I appreciate that. But the acceleration of technology and acceleration of change during times of war, the last 20 years we've been in conflict. But think of all of the advancements that have been made because of that conflict, right? The improvements that have been made in prosthetics, in burn treatment, in TBI, traumatic brain injuries, in PTSD, diagnosis of that silent killer, right? All of these advancements have happened at an accelerated pace because of warfare. And it's happened in every war. If we look back at the history of World War I and World War II, and the advancements in being able to treat burn victims and being able to treat amputees has always improved at a dramatic rate, and it kind of stagnates in between wars. But we've been at this for 20 years, which is a long war, and we've learned a lot. And we were able to capture a lot of those good things for our medical treatments. And I'm happy that that's what happens, because warfare is a horrible thing, and I'm glad there's at least one good thing that comes of it. But we've kind of been at war for the last 18 to 22 months in this COVID. These are kind of warlike conditions. The acceleration of what you have had to do to service your population, right? To service your patients, to deal with each other, to deal with contractors. This has all been very difficult and accelerated. You know, if you're in March of 2020 and you're like, well, I think we probably got to close some clinics down and tell people to stop showing up. I don't know. Maybe we can still service I don't know. What can we do? And people like you got together and said, whoa, okay, we can still do this. We can still do this. We're going to have to take a pause for a second, but we're going to figure this out. And so COVID gave us this opportunity. I mean, look at the venue we're at right now. We didn't bring hundreds of people together from across the country at great expense. We're plugged in virtually, and we're able to talk to each other, communicate, share ideas, inspire each other virtually in a way that 2, 3, 4 years ago we would have been like, it's another webinar, I don't know. But now we know that this is real. This is a good interface. This works, right? That probably would not have happened had it not been for the pandemic. We're safer from everyday diseases, not just COVID, because we mask up when we're in the facilities. We have those plastic shields that you installed. We reach people where they are in smaller numbers so they're exposed to fewer people. You look at the flu numbers this year, they're down dramatically, right? Because we've kept these distances, because we've made adjustments, and these things, many of them are going to stick. And that's a challenge for us in the improvement and innovation business, right? Which things did we accomplish over the last 2 years of this pandemic and over the last 20 years of war that we need to keep? And which ones are really over the top, too much control, maybe it's not allowing people to get things done that they need to? Which ones need to be sidelined until the next crisis? This is for all of us to think about, not just the leaders, right? We have to think about bringing the good stuff that we've learned over the last 2 years and over the last 20 years. And let's get rid of those things that don't work, that don't serve us and our clients and our patients. This is a really interesting time. So aside from warfare and aside from a pandemic, in the meantime, the tech world is not slowing down. Look at all the stuff that's happened. You know, you've heard this a lot of times, that this is an unprecedented rate of change, right? And if you think about it, the Wright brothers sustained flight 1903, 118 years ago. And now we have 93,000 flights a day with an incredible safety record. Incredible in the last 100 years. Prior to that, right? Prior to that, and prior to our modern communications, I mean, how fast did a message travel around the world? Like the fastest running peasant, one guy with a horse? Thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of years of human history, nothing moved faster than a horse. And now we put up 93,000 flights a day, instantaneous communications around the world. You could take a picture in Orlando and somebody can see it in Beijing in 10 seconds. That's crazy. So we have to be able to adjust, not just to the kinds of things like warfare and pandemics, but a changing digital landscape, a changing technology. We no longer have the luxury of doing things the way we were established to do them. Our clients, our customers, our patients have higher expectations of us than that, don't they? They are now like, well, hold on, why isn't there an app for that? Why do I have to go sit someplace when I could just do this on an app? How come I have to wait on hold? Can't I just fill out a form online? Why am I filling out paperwork everywhere I go? Why can't I fill out one piece online and let it? The expectations from the people that we serve are higher, and they should be. And they should be. And I get that we're a bureaucracy and we want to have predictable results, and we have a hard time getting rid of the stuff that we've accumulated over the years. But that's exactly what you folks are doing, right? You're looking at what systems can we improve? What can we? What can't we? And by the way, when you're doing that, you can't limit yourself. You can't limit yourself to, well, the regulation says this. Regulations can be changed. Every one of those regulations has a version number, and there's a reason for that. And sometimes, well, that's in law. That's a law. We're going to have to follow that. Yes, I'm not advocating that we disobey the law. But if the law is stupid, we ought to change it. And there are congressmen and women and senators who are willing to listen to you because you're the experts. And you say, if you could just relieve us of this requirement that's in the statute, we could be so much more efficient. The statute was written in the early 1900s. This is 21st century. Why are we still doing things that way? Laws can be changed. Regulations can be changed. Policies can be changed. Don't limit your imagination on how much better we can be. Don't put those handcuffs on that are those regulations and policies. And again, you got to follow them until you get them fixed, but you ought to have a sustained process for going after those. And I know at the highest levels in the VA, they are doing that, right? But how much are you communicating to those folks that it would be so much better if you at the VA in DC can impact those things. And you know what they are. You know what's holding you back. You are the experts at what you do on a day-to-day basis. And you are, again, you're kind of a malcontent because you're like, you know what? I'm going to be part of the improvement and innovation community because I want things to be better. Don't play small ball. Think big. Think how we can bring all of these great ideas together, take the handcuffs off, and fly into the 21st century. We can service our veterans better. So over COVID, over the last, I guess in 2019 to 2020, we saw a lot of change. We saw a lot of improvements. And one of the statistics I heard, it was amazing. There was 9,000 monthly VA Video Connect appointments in October of 2019. And by September 2020, there was 124,000 a month. Look what you can do. And I'm sure we're tracking metrics on the quality of care because none of us want to give less than great care to our veterans. So I know the quality is there. I have done telemedicine and I've used it for my family and I think it's fantastic. For 90% of what we end up having to see a doctor for or a nurse for, we are able to do this through telemedicine in a way that is efficient and they're able to see more patients and the quality is fine. And I think that this is one of those improvements that has to stick. It has to stick. It's going to allow us to spend more time with those folks that have more serious cases, and it's also going to allow us to get access without having to spend an entire day getting to the VA and waiting. These are things that you guys are fixing, and I love it. I love it. You know, we haven't got it all figured out yet, though. Right? Is we're still learning, we're still thinking every single day. And that goes back to the first thing I talked about, attending to what it is we're doing on a day-to-day basis. Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? What can we be doing better? How can I contribute to that? And believing that you can contribute to that. You can make a difference. So what's new? What is new? What has been happening? We saw a list of those over the week. The clinical contact centers, Video Connect, the Lean Forward program is amazing, right? 177 projects, thousands of employees that are involved. You're improving communication, telehealth, requires training and education, both for staff and faculty or the clinicians and for the veterans, right? And for the patients, right? The help desks are able to help bring things together for the telehealth working better. But what else is coming? What else are you working on? We talked about a few of them this week. But what else are you working on, right? How are we changing things? Is there an organizational change coming? Is there some way that we can improve the way we're structured that would also, challenge everything, right? Not to the point where we're being annoying. It's like, well, let's just challenge that. But the ideas, everything, nothing's sacred, right? Everything ought to be on the table to be examined. Right? When I talk about organizational change with leaders, I have a metaphor that I like to think about. It's you have kind of a cart. If you can imagine a cart, and on the front end of the cart is a rope. And you have a rope going onto the front end of your cart, and you have folks out front who are just pulling on that rope. They're pulling on the rope, trying to bring the cart forward. They're bringing your organization forward. Now, how many people are holding onto that rope? Right, just a few, I think. In many cases, it's a fraction of the organization, right? In the cart, you have those people who are doing the day-to-day stuff. They're not really working on moving the organization forward, but they're not really holding it back. They're important, right? Because they're getting the day-to-day stuff done, but they're not really moving the cart. Then on the back end of our cart, there's another rope, and there are several people who are pulling on that. And these are the naysayers. These are the ones who say, you can't improve that. No. This is the way I was taught. No. We've always done it like this. It's a fraction of your population. Statistically, across most organizations, 4% are in your front pulling your organization forward. There's only 4% of the people who are interested in innovation and improvement and pulling the organization into the future. Then you've got 80% that are sitting there on the cart, right? What does that leave? 16% of your organization. So, organizational theory, 16% of your organization is sitting in the back, pulling on it, holding you back. Now, leaders, I've got a question for you. What do you do? Where do you focus your energies? Right? Do you go to the back? Do you go to the back and you talk to that 16% and you're like, hey, man, you got to get on board. Get in the cart. Quit pulling us backwards. You try to turn them into the 4%, bring them up front, have them pull. You have to figure that out. Oh, by the way, you can also talk to the 80% that are sitting in the cart and try to convince a couple of them to get out front as well. But if you as a leader are spending all of your time up front, encouraging those 4%, trying to grow it to 5% or 6% or 7%, if you spend all of your time up there, those folks in the back are going to dig in. Those folks in the middle are going to feel a little bit neglected. You have to balance where you spend your time. You as a leader have to think about who's moving the organization, how many people are moving the organization, and how do I not lose that 80% that's really carrying the place forward. Or really, really keeping us open, right? Doing the day-to-day stuff. And how much time can you spend on the guys in the back end? Because that percentage on the back side represents a problem to you because they're the brakes to your innovation and improvement. They're the brakes. They're what's holding you back. And some of them can be convinced to stop hitting the brake, and some of them will never be convinced. And that's where hard choices start coming. How dedicated are you to moving into the future? How important is changing the organization to you as a leader? If they can't be convinced to get in the cart, are you going to allow them to drag you backwards? They outnumber the folks out front. It might be worth your time to consider that some of those folks need to find something else to do. And that's a hard decision and it's a difficult thing to do. I will tell you, as part of a government bureaucracy, I did it more than once. It was never pleasant. It was never something I wanted to do, but it was always the right thing for the organization. I had some very difficult conversations with people, and sometimes they said, you know what, I never realized I was being perceived that way. I actually really love the organization, and they come on board, and sometimes they're the best advocates for improvement. Sometimes they're just tired. Sometimes you have to invite them to do something else for a living. Tough to do. I know. It's a challenge, but you care about this organization or you wouldn't be here. So I challenge you to take a hard look at what's holding you back. What are the roadblocks? And we know rules, regulations, policies are roadblocks. But just as often, it's people within our own organization that's a roadblock, and you're going to have to deal with that as well. Tough stuff. But that's what leaders get paid for dealing with the tough stuff. So when I think about your theme for this week, I love it. The game. Game on, right? Game on. Let's get things going. And I tell you, what is a game? What are the similarities between what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and a game? I'm like, what is it? A video game? Is it a sports game? You know, what's a strategy game? We got pilot programs. Is that like beta testing a new game? I don't know. There's a lot of things that you could do with this, and I love what you did with Legos. That's so much fun, right? But we're always asking, how do we compete together? How do we compete better? Right? If you watch a kid play a game, when he gets beat at it, he's like, oh, I know if I just do this differently, next time I'll be better. And they try something new, and they're willing. They're willing to fail, right? They're willing to try and to fail. By the way, that's the secret of innovation, right? Is to try and fail, right? Fail early, fail cheap, and learn from it. But that's what kids do when they're playing games. That's what we used to do when we were kids and we played games. We would fail at something. Aha, I know how to do this better next time, and I do it. Right? How do I beat the game? And that's what we have to ask ourselves, right? How do we beat the game? How do we service our patients better? How do we make the organization better? How do we beat the competition, right? And we can do that. We can do that by being willing to fail, to be willing to try new things. If you're not failing, you're not really trying anything bold, right? And I know we're risk averse. We're a bureaucracy. We're a government bureaucracy, by the way, one that gets in the press all the time, right? Anything we do wrong is going to end up on the New York Times. I get that. But if we're not innovating, we're stagnant, right? What did General Shinseki say? And he was a leader for both of our organizations at one point. You know, if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. So how do we compete better, right? When I ask my kids, I go, well, how do you get better at a game? It's like, you keep trying. Okay. And like, well, the real secret is, you gotta upgrade. Oh, okay. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, in this game, you got to get a magic sword. In this one, you need to get extra coins. We need to get the up-level car to do this. Okay. Well, what does up-leveling look like for our organization? What does it look like for Vision? How do we up-level? What does that mean? Well, we're going to have to think through that quite a bit, I think. We have to up-level our service, right? How do we up-level our service? Right? How can I do this a little bit better? How can I, when I failed in my service to a veteran, how do I do that better next time? Do I realize when I failed someone? That's a key. You got to know when you failed. Where do I get the up level, right? Where do I get the new idea? Where do I get the better system? A lot of times, and I looked through the crowd on the Zoom meeting, I saw quite a few young folks, and I guess to me, as a older retired military guy, that everybody looks a little bit younger than me, but there's a sense a lot of times in the innovation world that innovation comes from young folks. They're tech savvy. Don't confuse innovation with technology, right? Technology is applications of technology can be very innovative, but don't lose sight of the fact that the people who've been here longest know what's wrong with the place, and they probably have the best ideas about how to fix them. And many, many times it's not a technological solution. Many times it's a leadership solution or an organizational solution or a process solution, right? And I know you have a system for doing that. You guys have been going through the Lean Six Sigma for the improvement side of it. And I think that's a fantastic program, and I'm glad to see that you've got black belts and green belts, and you guys have been going through the process of learning how to do improvement systematically, right? There's nothing worse than having a lot of good ideas that just go into a system and never come out. Right? So to have a systematic process for it is fantastic. But remember that the people with a lot of great ideas are often the people who've been here for a while. And so your seniors are often the most innovative people that you got if you get them a chance and you get them to share with you. When you up-level, part of that is not just up-leveling your process and your organizational chart either. Can you up-level your employees? Right? We all have some great employees. You've got some average employees, and then you've got the other folks, right? That need a little love. That sometimes take up a lot of your time, right? But where do those great employees come from? Did they come already as somebody, were they already great when they showed up, or did you help them become better? And this is what I'm talking about up-leveling. When you have an average employee and you turn them into a great employee, imagine moving that entire curve to the right, where you just say, you know what, all of my employees are fully engaged and fully contributing in a great way for our organization. That's up-leveling, right? That's the magic sword. That's the extra car with the boosters and stuff, right? That's the game we want to play, is when we're up-leveling all of the characters in our story. We're up-leveling all the characters in our story. How do we do that? We got to invest in them, right? Now, I don't know about your education and training budget, but I do know in the Department of the Army, our DA civilians far too often turned back training dollars that could have been used for education or training or certifications because people were too busy for improving the people within the organization. No, we couldn't possibly send Bob off to school. He's so important to this project. I watch leaders in the army do this too sometimes. They would delay somebody's chance to go to school because they were really, really important to this particular mission. I always notice those commanders seem to leave on time to their next thing. To me, that's a crime. If we're going to uplevel our organization, we need to uplevel our characters. We need to uplevel our employees. We need to invest in them. And sometimes that means sending them away for a little bit. Sometimes it means sending them to a conference, or sometimes it just means spending time with them with one-on-one mentoring. It means developing them. And I'm not talking about the annual, the position assessment, right? Annual assessments are usually very bureaucratic. They're all due at the same time, and so people put the least amount of effort in there, and then we put stuff in there that's not really useful. Feedback. Feedback to your employees is a gift, and you should be generous with that gift. It's important for people to understand how they're doing and what they could be doing better, because they want to up level. They want to be better, and leaders, you must help them be better. Peers, you have to help your friends be better. Feedback is a gift. Leadership training will help your senior leaders, your mid-level leaders, and your first-time leaders get better at leading. One of the worst things that we did in the Corps of Engineers was select new leaders who had no leadership capabilities whatsoever. But they've been there for a long time, and hey, Bob over there was the best engineer in the design section, and when the old guy left, he was the obvious choice because he'd been there forever. What they weren't thinking was, Bob's been there forever, but he's had his head down the whole time doing design work. He's the best designer we got, but he doesn't really like people. And he certainly doesn't like all the administrivia that leaders have to do in a government bureaucracy. He'd be a horrible leader. No, well, all we decided was he'd been there the longest, it's his turn, and we need to put him in that position. And Bob does a horrible job. And the people are miserable, and they're leaving the design section. Or worse, they're leaving our organization altogether. Why do we do that? Why do we do that? Do we even ask Bob if he wants to be a leader? No, Bob wants a raise. So he's gonna take the position because, he's been here a while and he kind of like a little extra cash. But is that what's right for the organization? And can we find another way to compensate Bob for his longevity and good service? Up-leveling our employees means taking care of them, and that means leadership. You also have to prepare people for those positions. You don't just throw them in there and say, okay, good luck. Last week you were an individual contributor. This week you're a leader, and go. That's a good way to watch somebody stumble over themselves and get stressed out. If you train your leaders before they get in leadership positions, you're going to be so much better off. When you onboard people, I know you have a formal process for bringing in new folks, and they have to sit through many classes, and they learn how their pay gets done and how they can take leave and how they can, or their PTO, however you work that. That all becomes very administrative most of the time. And I watch a lot of my clients onboard people. I like to sit in their onboarding classes, and I try not to fall asleep in most of them. As a commander in the Corps of Engineers, for 3 years, I never missed an onboarding class. Even though I traveled extensively, they made those classes scheduled around my travel schedule because I had to be there to look every employee in the eye. And I would tell them stories. That's all I would do. I would tell them stories. And the first story I would tell them about was a time I was at Fort Carson, Colorado for an exercise. And another colonel and I were in charge of a big portion of this exercise, and a big snowstorm hit. And we had to go in because we were in charge of some stuff. So we trudged through the snow, and on the way there was a dining facility, and we stopped for breakfast and just to grab something, and we're going to grab our lunch to go because we knew we weren't going to get back out again. And as we walked in, there's a private sitting there, and he checks our ID cards, makes sure it's okay for us to eat there. And he says, okay, you guys come on in. And he just stands there. We ordered some food, and we decided, we need to get some condiments and some utensils for later on. And we got over to the condiment station, and it's a mess. Like, the condiments were out, some of them were on the floor, and there was no napkins there, and everything was just a total mess. Now, we were 10 feet away from where this private was, And John, the guy that's with me, he was an old crusty colonel, not like me. I'm still a young colonel, but he was an old crusty colonel. And he just looks over and he goes, "Private, what's going on here? You see this mess?" And the private says, "Oh, yes, sir, I do. Yes, sir, I do. I see that mess." And he says, "Well, how come you're not cleaning this mess up?" And he goes, "Well, sir, I don't really work here. I'm just borrowed manpower. I was assigned here just to check ID cards." And that's all the instruction I got was to check ID cards. And John looked at him and says, "Really? And you don't think you can clean this up?" He goes, "Oh, it definitely needs cleaning, and I could definitely do it, but that's not my job. I was assigned to do just this." You see, nobody had told the young private that it was okay for him to make something better. I looked every new employee for 3 years in the eye and I told him, it's okay. It's okay for you to make things better. You don't need any additional permission to help your teammate out, to service your clients better, to make improvements where you live within your authority, and if it's not within your authority, to suggest it to whoever authority is over it. You have permission to make things better. It was powerful. 2 years later, a young engineer had some sensors, some flow sensors out in one of our rivers, and they kept getting struck by lightning, and we'd have to replace these sensors. And they were hundreds of dollars for these things. And he took one apart and he said, the part that blows when lightning strikes nearby is like a $4 part, and we keep spending hundreds of dollars on these sensors. I wonder if I could just replace just that part from something I get down there at the Radio Shack. And so he did. So he fixed one and it worked. So he fixed another one. Next thing I know, he's fixed hundreds of them. And somebody finally tells me about it. They say, this guy's fixed hundreds of these things. He saved us $15,000 or $20,000 this summer. What? So we were at a gathering, and somebody pointed this out. I said, "Hey, John, who told you could do that?" And he looked at me and goes, well, nobody did. It was just the right thing to do. And I gave him a big hug. I tell you what, nobody had to tell him you could make improvements. He just did it. And that's what each and every one of you are capable of doing and are doing. Take the handcuffs off. Don't let the bureaucracy beat you, right? You have it within you to make huge impact on this organization. You're already doing it. You're going to keep doing it. Capture the great ideas as they come to you. Be inspired. Bring what you learned this week back with you. Own your stuff and stick the landing. Make sure, I think about stick the landing when you're a gymnast and you do this big routine that you've done this week and you've done all of this work and you reported on the stuff that you've done for an entire year. Bam, stick the landing. Make sure that you finish strong. You bring back great ideas. You put them in place. You sprint through the finish line. Tremendously exciting what you folks are doing. I am happy to be serviced by the VA. I have to check out what Vision's going to do for me in the Tampa area, but I am excited that men and women like you are making huge differences in lives of me and my buddies who served this country for many, many years. And I want to thank you, not just for what you do, but for how you do it. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with you. I hope I didn't go over my time, but I'm very, very excited about what you do and I'm very impressed. Thank you. Thank you.